The story I was told happened a long time ago. It happened in a luxurious apartment complex in the neighborhood where I lived. There used to be a very nice apartment located on the top floor of the building, and it had the most expensive rent in the area. Previously, the room was rented by a young couple. The wife often had a habit of bathing at night and staying in the bathroom for a long time to clean herself before going to bed. At that time, as usual, the wife locked herself in the bathroom, but after waiting too long without seeing his wife come out, the husband would stood outside and impatiently called his wife. Afraid of her husband's anxiety, the wife tried to finish quickly to get out and let her husband use the bathroom. Standing alone in front of the large mirror in the bathroom, she suddenly felt pressure in her heart. She felt that the atmosphere in the bathroom today was a bit quieter and colder than usual. Outside, she heard the sound of footsteps slowly approaching. The footsteps kept echoing, but she immediately realized that it was not her husband's footsteps. While she was busy observing the door outside in front of the mirror, another image of her was looking at her with horrible eyes. The young girl at first still didn't know what was happening to her. She still calmly took a towel to wipe her face quickly. But it was also at that moment when her eyes involuntarily glanced at the large mirror opposite her. She saw the reflection in the mirror that was a bit different from herself, which surprised her. She hadn't been able to determine if what she saw was an illusion or not when suddenly the person in the mirror glanced up at her and gave her a devilish smile. When the wife saw it, she panicked and screamed. Her feet quickly stepped back, her face became very pale. Then, following her inertia, she fell and hit the door. Her whole body fell and she couldn't even stand. She once again looked in the mirror to check, but the woman in the mirror had disappeared as if nothing had happened. Her husband outside heard the noise, so he rushed inside and opened the door to check. But because she was so scared, she could only stand shaking. She did not know how to tell her husband the strange story. She could only stammer unclear sentences. Her eyes were looking into the mirror for a signal. Unfortunately, when her husband appeared, those strange things ended. However, her husband thought that she was so tired that she was confused, and he took her out. But the woman was sure that someone was looking at her. When the bathroom door was closed, the strange woman immediately reappeared with a face full of intrigue. That night, the family of this young couple who had just moved in encountered a strange disaster that they had never seen before. When the wife tried to tell her husband about the horror story she encountered, the husband remained silent, his face showing contempt, and he did not believe what the wife had said. That silence made the wife feel angry. She blurted out saying goodbye to her husband, but he had just lowered his head as if silently agreeing with what she said. After a while, the two of them argued loudly with each other. The first time the husband got too angry with his wife and then loudly proposed to break up. After he finished speaking, he quietly walked out, while the wife looked at her husband silently, feeling that there was something very disappointing in her heart. That night, she stayed alone in the newly rented room and burst into tears, thinking that her husband's feelings had changed and no longer loved her as before. In the middle of the night, she sat waiting for her husband in the living room, but still did not see her husband return home. The young wife was sad. She was holding her face while sobbing. Right at that moment, from the bathroom suddenly appeared the figure of a woman gliding towards the wife, her eyes constantly looking at the wife crying on the chair. She stood beside the wife silently. Apparently, the wife didn't even know about the strange woman's presence in the room. The only thing she could do at this moment was burst into tears like a baby. The sadness just killed her heart. Seeing that, the woman took advantage of the opportunity. She bent down and whispered into the wife's mind extremely negative things about the love that she and her husband had for each other for so long. The wife felt that this woman was telling the truth, so she stopped crying and looked at the strange woman with a very pitiful expression. The woman's eyes suddenly lit up like two car lights and kept looking at the girl in front of her for a second. Then she gave a devilish smile, her eyes also shining scarily as if she was plotting something. The young girl was immediately hypnotized by the witch's gaze, becoming lifeless and insane, no longer aware of anything else. After that, she stood from afar, directing the young wife to do foolish things to be able to hold her husband's pity. The wife obeyed the witch's words, subconsciously went to the cupboard in the room and took out a sleeping pill bottle. But there was one thing that the wife still did not expect. That was, this wooden cabinet was actually the closet of an old owner who used to rent this room. Even the sleeping pill she found was a bottle that had been in the cupboard for a long time, that she had not cleaned since moving there. At first, she looked at the bottle in her hand with a little hesitation, but when the strange woman appeared and whispered in her ear, immediately she poured all the pills in the bottle into her hand and drank them all at once. She could feel the discomfort and burning slowly in her body. A moment later, with the effect of pills causing the girl's body to appear convulsive, saliva also flowed on both sides of her mouth, the wife immediately passed out on the floor with a cold body. The last images she saw were of a strange woman with a smile that couldn't take her eyes off her. She smiled delightfully. It seemed that this witch had been wanting this for a long time, and she was enjoying it very much. The whole room then sunk into the cold. No one knew that the young wife was in trouble in that room. Fortunately, the husband, because he didn't call his wife, he worriedly ran home. When he arrived, his wife's body became much weaker. He saw his wife lying on the floor and immediately ran over to check on her. As soon as he arrived, he found a long expired sleeping pill lying on the floor, a hunch that seemed to tell him something. He immediately called an ambulance and ran to help his wife up. He was so worried at the time. The wife then opened her eyes slightly when she heard her husband's call, but her body was already frozen and couldn't move at all. A few minutes later, the ambulance also appeared. The husband and a few other doctors together took the wife into the ambulance and took her to the hospital. Fortunately, the wife was discovered in time, so her life was saved, and when she regained consciousness, she told her husband everything. The husband then began to believe what his wife had said and learned about the history of the room from the people around, and then he found out that the young woman used to rent this house to live with her boyfriend. While they were living there, somehow the two of them had a big fight. Then the cold husband left, leaving his wife alone in the house. The wife then, because she was too traumatized and she thought about it, used sleeping pills that were in the house to commit suicide and died right in that bedroom. After discovering the girl's body, the building staff also cleaned it up, but the remaining belongings of the girl were still intact, which inadvertently caused the girl's soul to stay there and unable to get out. It seemed like the ghost was waiting for other women in the same situation to incite them to commit suicide in her place.